strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength of street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
And welcome back to another Warrior Creed live stream. The topic for today on your screens right now: provoking World War III. Israel attacks Iran and demands American support. Clearly, the topic which has been all over your news headlines this week. It would be no surprise to many of you. That's what we will be discussing today. And of course, most of you will be aware of what's happened to date in terms of just the events as they have unfolded. Israel bombed Iran. Iran retaliated by responding and bombing Israel back. It's important to remember here that Israel bombed Iran in a unilateral attack, and Iran responded. And nevertheless, that's led to a tit-for-tat in reciprocal ongoing missile strikes between the two countries. We are less concerned for the duration of this stream with the facts and events as they unfolded, because you're aware of them all. What we are going to focus on, as we try to do in this stream, is give you the lion's share of our time to analysis, our geostrategic perspective and forecasts as to what is going to happen and how this will all develop. And let's begin by starting with the top headline for our geostrategic analysis, and that is that you need not be worried. We are not about to enter World War III. In fact, the United States of America, led by President Donald Trump, is not about to take sides militarily in this war, barring any surprising, unexpected escalation. While the Iranian and Israeli missiles are engaged in reciprocal attacks, and as the situation remains contained in the theater of war as it is between Iran and Israel directly, we're not expecting the United States, nor President Trump leading the United States, to get directly involved in this war, despite what your headlines are saying, despite what some MAGA commentators are worried about. In fact, some of them ditching MAGA as a result of this escalation. That's a unwise move, and in fact wrong. Comic Dave Smith being one of them, calling perhaps for the impeachment of Donald Trump over this escalation in conflict between Iran and Israel. But that's because people, perhaps unwittingly, are falling for the disinformation put out by Netanyahu and his network of the Likud Zionists, who have their levers on many narratives across our corporate media. And they are falling for some of that disinformation and believing that President Trump is about to join this war on Israel's side. We're going to spend the rest of this stream unpicking why that will not happen, why people have, of course, reason to worry, but not reason to panic. If it did happen, it would mean that we've moved closer to the start of World War III than we've ever been, having just avoided it over Ukraine. And what we're going to demonstrate over the course of this stream is that the direction of travel is well on its way towards peace. A grand regional strategy, a grand regional agreement for peace is still on the table. And we're calling it a grand regional settlement for peace. That is still on the table, and it will remain on the table. And in fact, off the back of this recent escalation in conflict, it will only reinforce the need for a grand regional settlement for peace. People need not panic. We are not about to enter World War III, despite what Netanyahu is seeking to provoke. He and his Likud Zionist network are seeking to provoke World War III. The reason why they're seeking to provoke World War III is when you've lost at the negotiating table in terms of what your demands are, your next best option is to create chaos so that you have a better chance of landing on your feet off the back of that chaos than you would have if peace were to be achieved. Netanyahu has recognized that Trump is well advanced in his attempts to, for himself, get a Nobel Peace Prize, but actually for the world, regardless of what Trump's personal motive may be, for the world to arrive at a grand regional settlement for peace, beginning, of course, at the top with Putin over Ukraine and over the Middle East, ending and culminating in a revived Abraham Accords and the creation of a Palestinian state. Netanyahu's realized that Trump is advanced in his stages at attempting to achieve that, and has realized that his diplomacy and efforts to negotiate a stronger hand for his Likudnik Zionist network is failing. And recognizing that it's failing, has decided that his next best bet to get what he wants from these peace negotiations is to spark chaos so he can throw the board up in the air and hope it lands in a better place. In other words, change the facts on the ground. That's the plan Netanyahu has always been working towards, and it's why he's always been provoking war. Those who provoke war is because they have nothing left to lose. That's where Netanyahu finds himself, because he's overplayed his hand. He has lost the global war of hearts and minds. He has also lost the regional geostrategic conversation, and he has also lost Trump. Despite what your headlines may tell you, and despite what it appears so in the corporatist media, there's a very specific reason why this is such a delicate matter. And it relates to the influence that Netanyahu's Likudnik Zionists have on many levers of power in Western democracies. However, Netanyahu, having lost the regional geostrategic play, having lost his alliance with Trump, having therefore attempted to provoke yet another time World War III, this time with Iran. None of that, Netanyahu's plan, the hopes that off the back of this chaos, his hand is stronger, none of it will work. The plan is failing, and the plan will fail. And we're going to explain all of this in this stream. Let's begin by getting some of the worrying headlines out of the way and explain some of what's going on. Here is a White House official tweet from 15 hours ago. You can see there, and it's a quote of Donald Trump's own Truth Social post. And Trump, the president, has said Iran should have signed the deal. I told them to sign. What a shame and waste of human life. Simply stated, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I said it over and over again. And the worrying line, everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. And the official White House account has posted that and requoted the words there at the top. Now, many have seen this tweet as a worrying sign that Trump is about to do something dangerous with regards to Tehran, perhaps bomb Tehran. We can reassure you this is not about to happen. Regardless of what that tweet says from the White House, and regardless of what Trump's Truth Social post says prior to it, it's not about to happen. One has to have an understanding of a taste in how to read the news and how to understand what messages are being conveyed. One has to also understand what news is genuine, what news has substance, and what news is a distraction. That is somewhat of an art, and it takes time. It takes a lifetime, in fact, of engaging with geopolitics. And as we said, taste in understanding what is a distraction and what isn't. And the best barometer for judging whether somebody has that taste in understanding what's a distraction and what isn't is how accurately they are able to forecast events. We hope, at least with our regulars, that from COVID to date, and before COVID, with our work on counter-extremism and counter-terrorism through Quilliam, warning people that groups such as ISIS would eventually emerge, which they did, and of course facing great backlash from within our own Muslim communities for challenging Islamism and jihadist terrorism so publicly, founding the world's first counter-extremism organization to do so in 2008. We hope that our track record, with all of that history to date, demonstrates that having been able to forecast the major events pretty much accurately up until today, we hope that our track record demonstrates that we have some of that taste in being able to understand which pieces of news are distraction and which articles of news have substance. And from this one on your screens now, what we'll tell you is that this is not what's going to happen. Trump is not going to bomb Tehran. In fact, this piece of news here should be read, and the White House official account posting it, should be read as a negotiating hand. That's how that piece of news should be read. And the threat contained within it, again, should be read in the context of the negotiations that were ongoing until Netanyahu decided to bomb Iran. There are not two parties to these negotiations. It's not a negotiation between Israel and Iran. It's also not a negotiation between Israel and America on the one hand and Iran and Russia on the other. In reality, the world is a lot more complicated than that. These are multilateral negotiations with various interests at play involving world peace. And because the world comprises of more than one country and more than two countries and more than just one superpower, it's important to analyze these events in the context of a multilateral framework, understanding what the multilateral interests at play are. What does Trump want with the region? What does Russia want with the region? What does Israel want with the region? What does Iran want with the region? When you understand all of this, you begin to understand when Trump means what he says, when he's saying something to threaten people for the purposes of negotiations. And when you understand that Trump wants peace in the region, unlike Netanyahu, and unlike in some instances where the Iranians diverge, such as their support for the, say, militia around the region, such as the Hezbollah terrorist militia in Lebanon, such as the Houthi militia in Yemen, such as their funding and support to date for Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza. When you understand that Iran, even though ostensibly doesn't want war with Israel, and yet has been, as due to its desire to pressure Israel, has been supporting terrorist militia around the region, this is where you understand that though Trump also doesn't want war between Iran and Israel, Trump diverges with Iran on their support for these militia across the region. Trump also diverges with Netanyahu in his desire, the latter's desire for war. So when you know Trump doesn't want war but doesn't agree with Iran's tactics of seeking to contain Israel in the region, you can see and read posts like this as Trump's angle to pressure Iran into coming back to the negotiating table, because they were due to meet on Sunday, and the Iranians cancelled the peace negotiation next leg that was due on Sunday because of what Netanyahu did by bombing their country. And this is Trump attempting to force the hand of the Iranians to get back to the peace negotiations, which will, we believe, happen. Don't panic. But Netanyahu's angle in bombing Iran was to scupper those peace negotiations that were ongoing. And of course, he's achieved it temporarily because the Iranians cancelled the next leg that was due on Sunday. That's 2 days ago. They cancelled the next leg of those peace negotiations. So Netanyahu's aim, his immediate aim to scupper those negotiations, looks like it's being met, but he will fail. Those negotiations will be resumed once the dust settles. Keep in mind something. Netanyahu has form in scuppering peace negotiations. The last time he did this was on October the 7th, when he facilitated the Hamas terrorist operation. Yes, it was a Hamas terrorist operation that Netanyahu and his Likudnik Zionist network facilitated. That has all come out since. Even Israel's former prime minister has also said that this is what Netanyahu was doing. He was facilitating the funding of Hamas and turning a blind eye to October the 7th so that he could use it as a pretext to occupy Gaza, Why? Because Saudi Arabia was just about to sign up to the Abraham Accords. And the Saudis withdrew from the Abraham Accords as soon as Netanyahu started his war on Gaza. And the Iranians have withdrawn from the nuclear negotiations with Trump as soon as Netanyahu started his war on Iran. The pattern becomes clear. Netanyahu is provoking war to circumvent the peace. That is what's going on here. It is a failing plan and it will fail. Netanyahu will not succeed. He does not have long left. He is desperate and he's behaving as a desperate man would behave. Somebody who loses at a game of chess and instead of accepting their defeat, tosses the board in the air and hopes that the pieces land randomly in a manner that is at least has a chance of being better than where those pieces were before they tossed the board in the air. He's losing. And that's why those who are losing in chess have every interest to continue the game in the hopes that they can at least get a stalemate. And a stalemate or a draw in chess is most likely towards the end of the game if you start playing offensively instead of defensively. Losing pieces, but also taking your opponent's pieces to try and draw their fire and reduce the number of pieces they have on the board in the hopes that in the end, through your recklessness, you can at least goad and provoke the other player into making a mistake and hope for a stalemate. And of course, nuclear war leads to stalemate. The doctrine militarily of MAD, mutually assured destruction, will lead to stalemate. It's why Netanyahu is behaving like a maniac, because he's going to lose, and losers who have nothing else to lose seek to provoke war in the hopes that at least the escalation leads to a stalemate. Because, of course, Netanyahu and Israel are known, though not officially, but pretty much an open secret, are known to possess nuclear weapons. That's what's going on. So it's in that context that we should read posts such as Trump's threat. That's simply Trump's playing a hard negotiating hand. And we're going to come to and explain all of this, including Trump's position over the course of this stream. Do not worry. We will get there. Bear with us. But for the moment, off the back of what we've just stated, that losers have every interest in escalation and provocation, it's in that context we're going to demonstrate exactly what's going on here. Netanyahu is using the very same lies that he used against Iraq, lies that there is within days going to be a nuclear strike. We must attack now. If we don't, Iran will develop a nuclear bomb. That same argument was made for Iraq. And of course, we know where that got us. It was a lie then, and it's a lie now. And here is Netanyahu making that lie historically over and over again, as if we're stuck in Groundhog Day, and as if people have very short memories and cannot think beyond one crisis to another, which of course is what they're hoping. They're hoping that people's memories, due to being overtaxed and overexposed, not having the time to recuperate between crises, they're hoping that people's memories do not go past the last crisis. But of course, some of us have longer memories than that, and some of us are able to maintain our sense of calm and composure in times like this and not panic. Here is Netanyahu lying over and over and over again, the same lie that every war needs to be started because the opponent is about to develop and deploy its nuclear weapons. Keep in mind when you hear this, the only country in the Middle East that is known to have nuclear weapons in the specific Middle East, not the greater Middle East, that would include Pakistan, but in the actual, what's known as the Middle East, the only country where these wars are, by the way, so the Levant, the Hijaz, Saudi Arabia, and of course, including Israel, the only country in the Middle East to have nuclear weapons is Israel. So keep that in mind when you hear this. But here is Netanyahu repeating the same tired and worn out lie that we need to go to war preemptively, of course, because the opponent is said to have nuclear weapons.
If you take away the Soviet Union and its chief proxy, the PLO, international terrorism would collapse.
If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you
that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. Obviously, we'd like to see a regime change, at least I would, in Iran, just as I would like to see in Iraq. The question now is a practical question. What is the best place to proceed? It's not a question of whether Iraq's regime should be taken out, but when should it be taken out? It's not a question of whether you'd like to see a regime change in Iran, but how to...
Are there any other nations that you would recommend that the United States launch preemptive attacks upon at this point?
The answer is categorically yes. The two nations that are vying, competing with each other, who will be the first to achieve nuclear weapons, is Iraq and Iran. But a third nation, by the way, is Libya as well. Libya is trying very rapidly to build an atomic bomb capability. So you have here now three nations.
All stand together to stop Iran's march of conquest, subjugation, and terror. I know that no matter on which side of the aisle you sit, you stand with Israel.
Well, of course, we know what happened in Iraq. We know what happened in Libya. We know what they're trying to do now as a result in Iran. And there's no reason to believe it will go any different to how it happened in Afghanistan. In all of these cases, the Americans and the consensus now is pretty much that it was folly to go into Afghanistan, to go into Iraq. And with regards to Libya, of course, the ongoing chaos there is pointing to a similar conclusion. But as we're stating, those who are losing the hearts and minds and diplomatic conversation have every interest in provoking war. And while provoking war, they also have every interest in threatening the ally countries that they want to join their war with them with false flag operations in an attempt to goad those countries into an overreaction and thereby join their war as well. The playbook was tried and tested on October the 7th. Radical Media, and over the course of this Warrior Creed live stream, has repeatedly published evidence and statements from former Israeli prime ministers themselves, but also other documented evidence from Israeli media that Netanyahu not only was warned prior to the October the 7th attack by the Egyptians, but in addition is documented and on record of having supported and facilitated Hamas through funding all the way up until October the 7th, and therefore facilitating the attack on October the 7th itself, while taking hours and hours and hours for the Israeli border guards and the IDF to respond to that attack, all pointing to a conclusion that Netanyahu facilitated the October the 7th false flag attack, which was conducted by the terrorist group Hamas. But the important thing to remember is Netanyahu funded the terrorist group Hamas precisely for that purpose. The so-called mastermind, we say so-called because of what we're about to say next, the so-called mastermind of those attacks was the military leader of Hamas, the late Yahya Sinwar. Sinwar himself was released early from an Israeli jail. All his competitors around him, after he was released early from an Israeli jail, were assassinated by Israel. And yet somehow Yahya Sinwar was not assassinated. He rose to the top only to be able to carry out the October the 7th attacks. In fact, Israeli doctors saved Sinwar's life in hospital when he was in prison by operating on him. And so take the template of October the 7th as a false flag facilitated by Netanyahu in order to provide him with a pretext to invade Gaza. And you can, in that way, you can understand how it serves Netanyahu to facilitate false flag operations in the West now in order to bump Western allies into joining his war. And that's why we should, that's what we should understand before reading this headline that was published in Newsweek on the 13th of June. The headline by Newsweek states, MAGA warns of, quote, jihadi sleeper cells in US after Israel strikes Iran. Now, when you see that headline, the impression it would give is that MAGA, Trump's base, are warning of that. The truth is it wasn't MAGA, but of course, headlines such as these are precisely what the propaganda seeks to achieve. The person responsible for that headline, warning of quote unquote jihadi sleeper cells attacking in America due to Israel's attack on Iran, the impression that they want to give is that, by the way, the jihadis will be taking revenge for Israel's attack on Iran, but revenge against America. The person behind that headline was Laura Loomer. And despite the impression the headline is seeking to give, here's the truth of the matter. As we've posted in our response to Laura Loomer's post there, translation: this is a threat to MAGA. Join this next phase of our never-ending war. If you do not do so, we will launch false flag operations against you at home and blame Iran in order to force you into an idiotic overreaction so that you do join our war. That's what's really going on here. Because, of course, if you read that Newsweek article that states MAGA warn of jihadi sleeper cells in US after Israel strikes Iran, the very first line in the article states, Laura Loomer said this, and then the very next line states there's no evidence for such a concern or risk to the American public. There is no evidence. Headlines such as this and posts such as Loomer's are designed to try and goad and provoke the American population into supporting Netanyahu's war. And of course, Loomer has form. Here is Loomer when the LA riots were happening, saying time to deploy a Palantir to Los Angeles to deal with the illegals. You know you'd love to see it. You're lying if you say you wouldn't. With poster Isaac's Army beneath saying that was quick. Pay attention, fellow Americans. You are next. What's Loomer referring to? Well, Loomer is referring to how Palantir sold AI military targeting software to Israel to use AI to target Palestinians. It's here on your screens now, reported by Bloomberg, as we published in Radical Media, and the highlighted parts are our own words in Radical Media. We'll start with those at the top of the screen. There are major concerns around Peter Thiel's AI software, Palantir, using AI to target Palestinians for military strikes in Israel's war on Gaza. And then Bloomberg reports, 12th of January 2024, Thiel's Palantir, Israel agrees strategic partnership for battle tech. So for Laura Loomer to call on that same Palantir that uses AI military targeting software to target people, for Loomer to call for that to be implemented in America to deal with the LA riots, kind of tells you where she's coming from and why she continually seeks to goad the public into an overreaction, exactly as she did there with the LA riots and Palantir. That's what's going on. Loomer is seeking here, as we said, to threaten MAGA, that if the Americans don't join Israel's war, then there will be attacks on America, false flag attacks. We've just explained the October the 7th and how and that unfolded. It's a similar thing, false flag attacks against Western interests, so that the public then wants to join Netanyahu in the false belief that it would have been Iran behind those attacks to take revenge against Iran. If all else fails, that will be the next play. Already Netanyahu has blamed Iran for the 2 attempted assassination attempts on Trump. The truth is, as we know, that even as Radical Media published at the time, one of those assassins that was arrested was caught having trained in Ukraine. These were most likely Alphabet Agency, CIA jobs, and of course the CIA works closely with Mossad. And so that's how to read that particular post from Laura Loomer. And it's important to understand that even J.D. Vance's remarks saying that they only send Americans to war when necessary needs to be read in the context of last week's Warrior Creed stream. And that is that J.D. Vance is Palantir's man on the inside. He's the new Mike Pence. J.D. Vance is not your friend. J.D. Vance is Peter Thiel's creation. He is literally, from start to finish, Peter Thiel's creation. The man has no substance to himself and of himself. He is literally the creation of Peter Thiel and Palantir. And it's why we said in this post that is on your screens now, when somebody asked about J.D. Vance and his speech where he seemed to suggest that Americans would go to war, We said yes, but it doesn't matter. J.D. Vance is not the president. He's the new Mike Pence, a Manchurian candidate placed there to undermine Trump. He's a PayPal mafia placement owing his entire political career to Palantir's Peter Thiel, who is a globalist techno-fascist. Like Mike Pence, J.D. Vance will also fail. If in doubt, go to last week's Radical Dispatch, where all the written receipts are published, or the Warrior Creed live stream, or indeed the podcast with the Radical Dispatch, where we spoke about all of this using those receipts. This was a failed global palace coup against Trump. They were seeking to undermine Trump and place Vance in his place. It's why Elon Musk endorsed J.D. Vance in the impeachment of Trump. That was all last week. Do not allow yourself, due to jumping from crisis to crisis, to forget what happened just last week. Maintain a long memory. Do not panic and understand this is simply the next stage of a long enacted plan to undermine the Trump administration and force or bump America into joining Netanyahu's war, which, by the way, will fail. This is where we published all of that, and we're just going to remind you here, this is from last week's Radical Dispatch. It did not go unnoticed that J.D. Vance's name was brought up by Musk as the one he would like to see take over from Trump after the latter is apparently impeached. The Times of London reported 8th of June 2025, Trump v. Elon Musk may deliver one true winner, J.D. Vance. Quoting from that article, but the narrative took a more serious turn when Musk suggested it was time to replace the 17-year-old president with his vice president, J.D. Vance. The right-wing activist Ian Miles Chong, who's Musk's surrogate on Musk's own platform, Twitter, wrote, "President versus Elon, who wins? My money's on Elon. Trump should be impeached and J.D. Vance should replace him." Musk replied, "Yes." So keep all of that in mind. Don't forget the context in which this all has transpired. And it's in that context you read Luma's endorsement of Palantir and Luma's threat of a false flag attack if the Americans don't support Israel's attack on Iran. That's what you read between the lines. Of course, it's ostensibly presented as a jihadi revenge attack on America for Israel's attack on Iran. It wouldn't be. It would be a false flag attack on America to goad the Americans into joining Israel, into attacking Iran. And one of those commentators who has his head screwed on correctly is none other than Colonel Douglas McGregor, who keeps a calm head throughout situations like this. And you can see his post on your screens now, and we're going to read it. It's a bit of a long post, but it's worth reading. In the last 72 hours, Israel launched a preemptive strike against Iran when negotiations between Washington and Tehran were still ongoing. That's a key line there. Keep that in mind. The peace negotiations were ongoing and Israel launched an attack. To continue reading, Iran was caught off guard, but Iran recovered more quickly from its Pearl Harbor moment than Israel expected. In the last 18 hours after Israel's surprise attack, Iran responded firing hundreds of ballistic missiles, including hypersonic missiles, into central Tel Aviv and across Israel. Meanwhile, Israel's Iron Dome failed. Israeli intelligence failed. Now Netanyahu is pleading with Washington to intervene with American military power to rescue Israel from certain defeat, a defeat Netanyahu has crafted with encouragement from Washington. At the same time, Russia, China, Pakistan, and most of the Muslim world are rallying to Iran's defense. Supplies, equipment, and technical assistance are pouring into Iran. It's time for a reality check. Washington burned through $12 trillion in the Middle East since 2003. Result: 7,000 dead Americans, 50,000 wounded, open borders, and 100,000 Americans dying yearly from fentanyl poisoning. To continue from Douglas McGregor's post on this, today, the United States is $37 trillion in debt, a sum that does not include so-called agency debt. 77 million Americans voted for President Trump because he promised to end the overseas conflict and halt the march to World War III. Trump's mandate is unchanged. Secure America's borders, ports, and coastal waters. Deport illegal aliens. Crush the criminals raping and murdering Americans. Restore the rule of law, but not one more drop of America's blood for foreign wars. One Israeli airstrike on Karg Island, where 90% of Iran's oil exports flow, or Bandar Abbas terminals, and Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz. That's 20% of global oil supply. That means disrupted supply chains and runaway inflation. Gas hits $7 per gallon overnight. Every working family crushed. Truckers can't deliver food. Economy crashes. For what? So Israel, that started this insane war can drag Americans into a wider regional conflict with a potential for nuclear war? We have 40,000 troops in the UAE, Qatar, and across the Persian Gulf. They are sitting ducks. Iranian Shahed 136 drones cost $20,000 each. American Patriot missiles cost $4 million per interceptor. Do the math. We will run through our inventory of missiles and go broke while Americans come home in boxes. The Middle East is on the brink. Here's what Washington must do to defuse the conflict. And the final page. 1. Ask for an emergency UN Security Council meeting. Ask for an immediate ceasefire, making it clear that Washington opposes the destruction of Iran, Israel, and any other state in the Middle East. 2. Demand that Israel stop the killing of Palestinians in Gaza and withdraw its forces from Gaza and the West Bank. 3. Suspend all military aid to Israel until Israel agrees to remove its troops from Gaza and permit humanitarian assistance to reach the people of Gaza. 4. Propose the commitment of armed forces from non-aligned nations to police Gaza and the West Bank. 5. Propose that the United States, Russia, China, and India and Brazil convene a peace conference to arbitrate the dispute between Israel, Iran, and Israel's neighbors. I led American soldiers under fire into action. I've seen plenty of flag-draped coffins. I don't want to see any more. Washington's warmongers had 22 years. They failed. They lied. They profited while America bled. Time is up. America first means America first, not Israel first, not Ukraine first, not NATO first, America first. And we're going to now, of course, that's very good there from Colonel McGregor. And we're going to play you a video of Colonel McGregor's response to this latest flare-up now.
Wait a minute. That's a fundamentally false statement.
Which part?
False. They don't have the power to go to war.
And it showed that Iran was completely powerless to do anything about it. I mean, what nation on the planet can have their embassy destroyed in another country and to have an assassination in their capital city on an inauguration and not go to war with somebody? Yet that's exactly what Iran didn't do because they don't have the power to do it. So that should tell you.
Wait a minute. That's a fundamentally false statement.
Which part?
False. They don't have the power to go to war. You haven't looked carefully at Iran. Iran's arsenal of missiles is enormous. It could flatten Israel in a day. They have the power to go to war. They have chosen repeatedly to avoid war. And I've said this 1,000 times. No one in the Middle East is interested in a war except Israel and the United States. That's it. There's no one else in the region that wants a war. Everyone is going to go to great lengths to avoid a war, not because of Israel, but because of us. The Iranians don't want to go to war with us. The Iranians have been trying for 30 years to change their relationship with the United States, to build a rapport economically, socially, politically with the United States. So don't make the mistake of assuming because someone has opted not to do something, they can't. The real question at this stage is, what's the incentive for them to continue to do nothing, particularly when they're told that the only way they can satisfy us, potentially, based upon Mr. Netanyahu's demands, is to turn themselves into Libya. And we all know what happened in Libya.
Right. Yeah. Not a good situation to cite if you want them to accomplish it. But
so don't assume this weakness. I mean, people said the same things about the Russians. You know, the Russians went through years of humiliation at our hands as we advanced NATO further and further east and continued to treat the Russians as though they were irrelevant and created all sorts of utterly false reasons to embargo them and hurt them and harm them, particularly under Biden and his predecessors. None of this is new. Does that mean that the Russians don't have the power to go to war against us or anybody else? Well, obviously, the answer is no. They have the power. They have not wanted to go to war. It strikes me right now that if you look at the rest of the world, the only two powers in the world today that don't seem to appreciate the catastrophic consequences of a real war are the United States and Israel.
Now, we you see there what is going on. Israel provoking war, Netanyahu provoking war in the Middle East because he's lost the diplomatic bargaining. And Colonel McGregor making it very clear that Iran does have the capability to do a lot more than they're currently doing. Of course, even if you just do the math on the costs of the interceptor missiles, the US interceptors against Iranian drones, eventually it would bankrupt the economy because Iran has more missiles at a cheaper rate than can be intercepted, even for Israel. And that's currently on display with the current flare up and missiles exchange between the two countries. The idea that somehow Netanyahu is the good guy here and Iran are the bad guys is also a very simplistic idea, which we break down in the following words that should be on your screens now. Netanyahu is not Israel and Khomeini is not Iran, we've said. Your simplistic binary fails because more so than most people, we have opposed Khomeini's Islamism too. This will hurt your sense of moral righteousness, but you are not the good guys here. Both Netanyahu and Khomeini fall prey to an uncompromising good versus evil dualism that are actually part of the same problem. It is great that there are protests against Khomeini. This exact point can be made in terms of historically unprecedented popular protests against Netanyahu on the streets of Israel too, because the world is a lot more complicated than your petty jingoistic tribalism, and only warmongers speak in absolutes. So, having established that there are multilateral parties at play here, this is not a binary good versus evil war with Netanyahu representing all that is good and Iran representing all that is bad, or Khomeini representing all that is bad. It's a lot more complicated than that. And having established that what's really going on here is an attempt by Netanyahu to goad the Americans into joining his war because he's got nothing left to lose. He's playing for a stalemate because he's about to lose. And he will fail. That context explains this meme we're showing you now on the screens. A little Netanyahu hiding behind Trump saying, "I harassed Iran. Please, daddy, protect me." And the rest of this stream is going to be dedicated to demonstrating why and how Netanyahu has failed in his attempts to goad the Americans into an overreaction. Again, barring any dramatic false flag operation that isn't either thwarted or, if it does happen, the public fail to see through it. We do hope with this warning that the public understand that it will be a false flag operation, if indeed one occurs, in order to goad the Americans into an overreaction. But barring the failure of the public to see through a false flag operation, we think this plan will fail. And we've said so. This on your screens now was one of our immediate responses. Netanyahu and his Likudnik Zionist network put a great deal of misinformation out there to give the impression that Trump fully backed Israel to go to war against Iran. Corporatist media ran with it. Most Iranian analysts and anti-war activists took the bait too. This serves to divide MAGA and scupper ongoing US-mediated peace talks with Iran, which are the obstacle to Netanyahu's warmongering. This action was timed with the PayPal Mafia failed coup attempt, which was the subject, keep in mind, of last week's Warrior Creed livestream and last week's Radical Dispatch, with all the receipts published still there for you to see. Just go to majidnawaz.substack.com and you can see the article there about the failed PayPal Mafia coup attempt against Trump. To continue reading from that last paragraph, this action was timed with the PayPal Mafia failed coup attempt, the globalist-funded LA riots, and the No King protests against Trump, all to undermine Trump's administration and render it ineffective in the eventual hopes that their man, J.D. Vance, steps in to lead after any ensuing chaos. Their plan is failing, and it will fail. Since posting that, there have been other corroborating reports indicating that exactly this has been happening. In fact, here is Beth Sanner, the former deputy director of national intelligence, who, as a civil servant, used to brief Trump regularly on national security matters, saying exactly this on CNN. Have a look at this.
Spent your life in intelligence. You were a briefer of President Trump on his daily brief, as you didn't work for him. You weren't a political appointee, but you were a career government employee for a very long time working on issues of intelligence. So just on the intelligence part alone, Beth, what are you seeing that we're not seeing when you hear about this operation?
Well, it's really similar in many ways, I think, to Ukraine's spiderweb operation that we just saw a couple weeks ago, where, this was planned for, as Jamie was saying, for years, some of it maybe for months, but the Israelis were on the ground. They're on the ground now, from what we can see on X. And they emplaced things there. They used automation, they used high tech, but they also used really just intense human operations combined with this military power in order to blind the Israelis and the Iranians and take out their air defenses. But I think that the other point that I really want to make here is that the timing of this, the fact that they were planning this for years, and the fact that Netanyahu saw potentially the window closing with a potential U.S. deal meant that he needed to pull the trigger or throw this operation away. And so when he talks about a preemptive attack, I actually think he was preempting our negotiated solution as much as he was anything the Iranians were doing.
That is such.
And you can see that the exact same framework of analysis is being applied by Beth Sano there in that CNN clip. This was done by Netanyahu to scupper the ongoing peace negotiations that were about to succeed between Trump and Iran. And Netanyahu was hoping when he attacked Iran that Trump would be goaded into supporting him. Hence this image on your screens. I harassed Iran, please daddy, protect me. His hope was that Trump would be goaded into supporting him by the sheer force of public opinion around Trump. There are, of course, many in Trump's administration that side with the Likudnik Zionist agenda, including Trump's Secretary of State Rubio, and including many around Trump's close circle, as recently exposed by what the stunt that Elon Musk pulled. Because, of course, don't forget, the globalists, as confessed to by Klaus Schwab, seek to penetrate the cabinets in order to gain influence over domestic governments. But the plan failed. Netanyahu's attempt to try and goad Trump into the war, as has been reported by the original report, was in Axios. It was since followed up by Times of Israel. But here is the original Axios report. Israel urges US to join war with Iran to eliminate nuclear program. And we're going to go through this Axios report because it clearly demonstrates Netanyahu's plan to goad Trump into an overreaction has failed. And the Americans will not be joining Israel in this war. And Axios, continuing in that report, we'll just read to you from the screens. So the Trump administration over the past 40 hours to join the war with Iran in order to eliminate its nuclear program, according to two Israeli officials. The big picture: Israel lacks the bunker buster bombs and large bomber aircraft needed to destroy Iran's Fordow uranium enrichment site, which is built into a mountain and deep underground. The U.S. has both within flying distance of Iran. But the Trump administration has so far distanced itself from Israel's operation and argued that it would be illegitimate for Iran to retaliate by striking US targets. Directly attacking Iran, even if the US involvement is limited to bombing a single site, would pull the US directly into the war. However, if Fordow remains operational after the operation ends, Israel will have failed in its goal to, quote, eliminate Iran's nuclear program. And to continue reading from that Axios report, you can see there that the Israeli official claimed to Axios that the US might join the operation and that President Trump even suggested he'd do so if necessary in a recent conversation with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. A White House official denied that on Friday. A second US official confirmed on Saturday that Israel has urged the Trump administration to join the war, but said currently the administration is not considering it. A senior White House official told Axios Saturday that, quote, whatever happens today cannot be prevented. That's referring to Israel's attacks. But we have the ability to negotiate a successful, peaceful resolution to this conflict if Iran is willing. Do you see that? So the idea was, and of course, the Times of Israel followed up on that report. That's on your screens now. Israel asked the US to join military campaign against Iran, but US rejects request. Netanyahu's idea was to force and goad the Americans, create such a pressure around Trump through, of course, their media assets domestically, their neocon media assets within America, their penetrate the cabinet placements around Trump, such as what Musk would have been, but he's already self-combusted. But there are others, Rubio being one of them. They sought to create such a pressure on Trump that he would succumb and agree, like Bush did, to join their war, this time in Iran, of course, not in Iraq. But as reported there by Axios, Trump has refused. America will not be joining Israel's war. Do not pay attention to the misleading headlines, nor indeed that White House tweet that we posted at the beginning of this stream, where Trump appears to be threatening Iran. America will not be joining this war. And of course, to reinforce that, there is this news. Reuters reports, as published by Spectator Index, Reuters reports that President Trump even vetoed an Israeli plan to kill Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei. So it's all very clear. And the reason America will not be joining this war has been articulated in a very long post by Sohrab Ahmari, a US editor for Unheard, a news website, but also a American Iranian who's evolved in his own thinking around these neocon wars and by his own confession used to support them. The post that's on your screens now is a very long one, but we're only showing you the first section of it. It's a very long explanation. Sohrab Ahmari has said, we're about to get dragged into nation building 2.0. Keep in mind, by the way, this is the guy that was comments editor at the New York Post when the New York Post published news on that Hunter Biden laptop story that was suppressed. I then invited Sohrab Ahmari onto my then LBC show before they cancelled me to speak in 2020 about the Hunter Biden laptop when Twitter banned President Trump, the sitting president, from their platform, and all other social media began censoring a sitting president. So Sohrab Ahmari joined me on LBC and spoke openly and candidly about the Hunter Biden laptop. So he has history in speaking truthfully when it comes to all issues MAGA. And here he is. Of course, he's not MAGA himself. He's just a journalist. But here he is on his own personal page saying, we're about to get dragged into nation building 2.0. Israel has formally requested a direct US intervention in its war against Iran. The intervention itself will seem easy, relatively speaking. It's the aftermath you should worry about. What we're likely looking at is yet another nation building exercise in the Middle East, except on a much vaster and more complex scale than anything attempted in the post 9/11 wars. In other words, another decade or two wasted in the Middle East. If you don't want that, pray for rapid de-escalation. I should know. I wrote one of a very few attempts at imagining concretely what a post-Islamic Republic scenario might look like. That was in 2012, when I was younger and more naive about the limits of American power, but also when Washington was still basking in the admittedly fading glow of the unipolar moment. But this introduction to a much longer post that Sohrab published, we'll link it to the Radical Dispatch tomorrow, explains why Trump, it doesn't explain why, but it gives the context to why Trump and MAGA will not be joining Israel's war against Iran. It's simply not going to happen. And in fact, more concrete evidence in that direction is reported by ABC, who interviewed Trump, and he made it very clear in this article that's on your screens now. Headlined, Trump says it's possible the US gets involved in Israel-Iran conflict, dated the 15th of June. Now, again, if you look at that headline, it gives the impression that Trump's going to get involved. And follow-up articles to that original ABC News story, including the Times of London, they interpreted it as Trump saying he's going to join Israel in its war against Iran, and that's what may get involved meant. That's a spin on the original story. If you actually look at this original ABC story that was a source for all those other spin-off stories on this topic, Trump never said he was going to join Israel's side in the war against Iran. This is very important, folks. Pay attention, because this is how the spin in media works. Trump saying that America may get involved was interpreted and reported in your corporatist press as Trump saying he may join Netanyahu in the war against Iran. He did not say that. The ABC News article itself goes into what Trump actually said in the detail of the text. But we're going to just summarize it for you. And that is effectively what Trump said was that he would welcome Putin getting involved with him to negotiate a peace deal between the two warring factions, not that he would get involved on the side of Israel in the war. And what's on your screens now indicates that. This is Trump's own post on his Truth Social page. Iran and Israel should make a deal, and will make a deal just like I got India and Pakistan to make. In that case, by using trade with the United States to bring reason, cohesion, and sanity into the talks with the two excellent leaders who are able to quickly make a decision and stop. Also, during my first term, Serbia and Kosovo were going at it hot and heavy, as they have for many decades. And this long-time conflict was ready to break out into war. I stopped it. Biden has hurt the longer-term prospects with some very stupid decisions, but I'll fix it again. Another case is Egypt and Ethiopia, and their fight over a massive dam that is having an effect on the magnificent Nile River. There is peace, at least for now, because of my intervention, and it will stay that way. Likewise, we will have peace soon between Israel and Iran. Many calls and meetings now taking place. I do a lot and never get credit for anything, but that's okay. The people understand. Make the Middle East great again. This context explains the ABC News headline that Trump said he may get involved. In fact, in that actual article of ABC News, it makes it very clear. What he said was he may get involved with Putin to negotiate a peace settlement between Iran and Israel. And he said Putin wants this and he wants this. And then at the end of that ABC article, he says, and peace will happen. There will be a deal. And in fact, here's Trump on video saying exactly that there will be a deal.
Well, I hope there's going to be a deal. I think it's time for a deal, and we'll see what happens. But sometimes they have to fight it out, but we're going to see what happens. I think there's a good chance there'll be a deal. Well, I hope there's going to be a deal. I think it's time for a deal, and we'll see what happens. But sometimes they have to fight it out, but we're going to see what happens. I think there's a good chance there'll be a deal.
And we're reassuring you that that's what Trump means when he says that they may get involved to negotiate a deal. That's been the trajectory for a long time. It's what happened in Syria. It's what Trump, in his own Truth Social post there, said happened between Pakistan and India. Trump is a peacemaker. As strange as that sounds to some of your ears that suffer from TDS or Trump derangement syndrome, Trump is a peacemaker. And whether it be for ego or whatever, perhaps he wants a Nobel Peace Prize, it doesn't matter what his motive is. What matters is his track record. And he has not started any new wars, and he's not about to break that for Netanyahu. Trump has been a peacemaker, and he's reminding us now, even through that video clip and that Truth Social post we just read for you, that his intention, even in this latest flare-up, is to make a deal, and he's saying that there will be a deal. He said it explicitly in the first line of that Truth Social post. And have a look at it again. It's on your screens again now. And it says, Iran and Israel should make a deal and will make a deal, just like I got India and Pakistan to make. So he's saying not only should there be, but there will be. And Trump had warned Netanyahu that he wouldn't be backing them. Netanyahu gambled by attempting to force the Americans into backing them, but Trump had already, prior to this flare-up, told Netanyahu that it's not a good idea and he will not be backing them. Have a listen to this.
Did you warn Prime Minister Netanyahu against taking some sort of actions that could disrupt the talks there in a phone call last week?
Well, I'd like to be honest. Yes, I did. Next question, please.
Doesn't that on sanctions?
I did, yeah.
If Senate Republicans want to push
It's not a warning. I said I don't think it's appropriate.
What exactly did you tell him? Did you
I just said I don't think it's appropriate. We're having very good discussions with him, and I said I don't think it's appropriate right now. Because if we can settle it with a very strong document, very strong, with inspections and no trust. I don't trust anybody. I don't trust anybody. So no trust. I want it very strong where we can go in with inspectors. We can take whatever we want. We can blow up whatever we want, but nobody getting killed. We can blow up a lab, but nobody's going to be in the lab, as opposed to everybody being in the lab and blowing it up, right? Two ways of doing it. Yeah, I told him this would be inappropriate to do right now because we're very close to a solution. Now, that could change at any moment, could change with a phone call. But right now, I think they want to make a deal, and if we can make a deal, save a lot of lives.
You see there, Trump is very clear. At the beginning of that clip, that was slightly cut there, but at the beginning, the question the reporter asked was, did you warn Netanyahu? And Trump says, to basically, yes, I did. And then it says, well, it wasn't a warning, it was advice or whatever. But he answered, yes, I did warn him. And that's the key part there, that Trump has always pressed for a deal and said, we are very close to a deal. And he told Netanyahu that this is not the right time to attack. And that's how to understand Trump's position throughout this. Ignore the corporatist media headlines. Netanyahu has been briefing media that Trump is truly on his side in an attempt to goad the Americans into backing his war. It's not the case. Trump is on the side of America. That's what America first means. He's not on the side of Israel first. That's Netanyahu's job. May Netanyahu, best of luck to him, being on the side of Israel first. America's job is to be on the side of America first. Britain's job is to be on the side of Britain first. That's how countries operate. America, Trump is not Israel's president. He's America's president. His ambition has always been to make a deal, because Trump has been, prior to even being elected as president in 2016 for the first time, he has been aware of the lies and how America was deceived into these wars. And that's not something you can simply erase. That's entirely what MAGA was built on. Here's a reminder for you.
They lied.
Okay.
They said
Saddam is
they lied.
Okay. They said Saddam is seeking and is working and is advancing towards the development of nuclear weapons. No question whatsoever.
They lied.
Okay.
They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right. No question whatsoever.
Look, bottom line, there were no weapons of mass destruction. They said there are weapons of mass destruction.
If you take out Saddam, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region.
Going into Iraq may have been the worst decision anybody has made, any president has made in the history of this country. That's how bad it is, okay?
We should have never been in Iraq.
I guarantee you, no question whatsoever.
And you can see there from that brief collage, again, the formatting for the live stream isn't really that good. We don't have the tech to get that formatting accurate, but all of those videos will be published in the Radical Dispatch with their transcripts tomorrow, and that's at majidnawaz.substack.com. You can go and check the receipts out for yourself. But that's the same Trump, remember, who's now president. He's not about to have amnesia and forget all of that. MAGA is literally, its DNA is built on an anti-war sentiment. It will not be easy for Trump to go against that. But in addition, a more updated version for you. Do not forget that Trump literally only just visited Saudi Arabia, as Radical Media reports on your screens now, 15th of May. Headline, Trump visits Saudi Arabia and freezes out Israel for normalization with Arabs. Trump only just visited Saudi Arabia and gave a linchpin keynote speech decrying Western interventionism. Trump is not just some individual randomly shooting from the hip with tweets and Truth Social posts and giving speeches like this without a trajectory behind him. Do remember, the Trump that everyone currently, Comic Dave Smith and others on the MAGA side even, are worried about, is about to join Netanyahu's war, is the same Trump that only a couple of weeks ago had this to say in Saudi Arabia.
And it's crucial for the wider world to note this great transformation has not come from Western interventionists or flying people in beautiful planes giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs. No, the gleaming marvels of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi were not created by the so-called nation builders, neocons, or liberal nonprofits like those who spent trillions and trillions of dollars failing to develop Kabul, Baghdad, so many other cities. Instead, the birth of a modern Middle East has been brought by the people of the region themselves, the people that are right here, the people that have lived here all their lives, developing your own sovereign countries, pursuing your own unique visions and charting your own destinies in your own way. It's really incredible what you've done. In the end, the so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built, and the interventionists were intervening in complex societies that they did not even understand themselves. They told you how to do it, but they had no idea how to do it themselves. Peace, prosperity, and progress ultimately came not from a radical rejection of your heritage, but rather from embracing your national traditions and embracing that same heritage that you love so dearly.
that wasn't just a random Truth Social post by Trump, happened to be reposted by the White House. Compare that speech with that White House tweet that we showed you at the beginning of this screen. We're going to see if we can get it back up again for you. And then think, which one do you believe? And it's clear that Trump's trajectory from prior to even becoming president all the way through has been to stop wars, not start them, to negotiate peace, not to scupper it, against interventionism, not for it. And that speech we just played you in Riyadh, the recent one from a couple of weeks ago, was a keynote policy speech. It wasn't just random off the cuff. That was a policy speech. Back to the issue of taste. You've got to understand how to distinguish between random posts or negotiating hands and threats, the keynote policy positions. That was one of the core policy positions that not just Trump and MAGA have taken, but under his leadership that the United States of America has taken. It no longer officially believes in intervening through war in the Middle East. That was only 2 weeks ago. That's not all just going to suddenly be raised because Netanyahu decided to take unilateral action. Laura Loomer decided to threaten false flag operations if America doesn't support Netanyahu. None of that's going to go away. Netanyahu's attempt is failing and will fail. And a few others have captured the sentiment, the MAGA sentiment, as clearly as Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene and Marjorie Taylor Greene. And we want to read her rather long, but nevertheless powerful post on this subject. And here she is on your screens now, saying everyone is finding out who are real America First MAGA and who were fake, and just said it because it was popular. Unfortunately, the list of fakes are becoming quite long and expose themselves quickly. Anyone slobbering for the US to become fully involved in the Israel-Iran war is not America First MAGA. Wishing for murder of innocent people is disgusting. We are sick and tired of foreign wars, all of them. And this one will quickly engulf the Middle East, BRICS, and NATO as countries are required to take a side. Real America First / MAGA wants world peace for all people and doesn't want our military killed and forever injured physically and mentally. We love our US military and love them helping to secure our borders and our cities for the defense of our people and our country. They are our friends, spouses, cousins, nieces, nephews, sisters, brothers, sons, and daughters. We have spent trillions in the Middle East, and we have dealt with the aftermath of death, blown apart bodies, never-ending suicides, and disabling PTSD. To continue reading from Marjorie Taylor Greene's, Representative Greene's post, all because they told us propaganda as to why we must sacrifice for some other country's borders and some other country's borders. I don't want to see Israel bombed or Iran bombed or Gaza bombed. I don't want to see Ukraine bombed or Russia bombed. And we do not want to be involved or required to pay for any of it. We are $36 trillion in debt and have mountains of our own problems. We have giant planks sticking out of our own eyes while we complain about splinters in others' eyes. Every country involved and all over the world can be happy, successful, and rich if we all work together and seek peace and prosperity. Taking this position is not anti-Semitic. It's rational, sane, and loving toward all people. And the final page there, taking the position of peace and prosperity for all is not isolationism. It leads to great trade deals and great economies that help all people. It's what many Americans voted for in 2024. America first, America first, America first. That is how we make America great again. And here is Representative Greene repeating that sentiment in a recent interview with Matt Gaetz.
You have been a voice of reason and America First policy. Tell us how you see this conflict between Israel and Iran.
Matt, I see it just as you do, and you laid that out so well. That's the America First message, but it's also the truth that the American people have woken up to. We've watched for decades propaganda news. I'll call out Fox News and the New York Post. They're known to be the neocon network news. We have propaganda news on our side, just like the left does. And the American people have been brainwashed into believing that America has to engage in these foreign wars in order for us to survive. And it's absolutely not true. Prime Minister Netanyahu said, I saw on video, he said today that America first is America dead. And that sounds like a threat to me. And I completely disagree with him on that.
In order for America to not be dead, it's to stay America first. And this is what the American people want. It is not anti-Semitic to say that we do not want to go to war against Iran or any other country. That is not anti-Semitic at all. It's actually rational, it's sane, and it's loving to people all over the world. A Middle Eastern war will pull America back 20 years, just like you showed in your intro for your show. It's exactly the lies that we were told after 9/11, and many people know it's not true. So I'm completely opposed to this war. Of course, we don't want to see the people in Israel bombed, but they're only being bombed because Israel attacked Iran first. And that's the truth that we need to be talking about. And Matt, I want to add on one more thing that I think is incredibly important, because Fox News and all these other news stations are not talking about it. Last week on Thursday, they held a vote in the Knesset, and Netanyahu only won by 2 votes, because the polling is showing that if an election was held today, he would lose. What he's doing is not popular among the people in Israel. They are tired of war. They are so devastated after October 7th. But they are tired of war, and that vote happened last Thursday, and then Friday Israel attacked Iran. That's why the bombs are falling, and it seems very political. And you and I have seen those types of things before.
Pretty good summary of the MAGA position, and it will be the case, as we stated, that Trump is highly, highly unlikely to join Netanyahu's attacks on Iran. Rather, what's going to happen is Iran will reciprocate as it has been and respond, and Israel will learn very quickly that standing on its own to attack Iran is not going to achieve much, and that they will also need to join or rejoin the negotiating table. And we conclude with these words, which are on your screens now. Hold the line, we've said. Hold the line. Netanyahu's attempt to drag Trump into direct war with Iran, which more so than Syria means a hot war against Russia and BRICS, and so would quickly descend into World War III, will fail. Netanyahu badly needs war, but he is isolated. His cheerleaders are in for a shock. That's all we've got time for this week's Warrior Creed live stream. Peace through strength. We end you on that note. That is how we get through this. There will be a grand regional settlement for peace. That is the trajectory. It is still on the cards, on the table. It's still what's going to transpire. Do not panic. We are not about to enter into World War III, inshallah, as we say, God willing. And we'll be back next week for the Warrior Creed live stream. We encourage all of you to go to Radical Media via majidnawaz.substack.com and sign up so that you can get the written version of this stream known as the Radical Dispatch, which contains all the links to all the receipts and all the videos that we've played you and more over the course of this stream. And we encourage you all to become premium members of Radical Media via majidnawaz.substack.com. And existing subscribers, we encourage you to become premium members, which gains you access to this Warrior Creed podcast, and in addition to exclusive behind the paywall content. Without your support, we cannot continue to do this work. Until next time, you've been listening to the Radical Majid Nawaz.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength. Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warrior